But like the one that you were talking about with the $2 million in outstanding loans, that was obviously with a real bank and all that. The banks that you invented, though, this is what's with me. You had websites for them. You made, what were some of the names, for example, that you would come up with?
I mean, you know, there was really only, was there 2 or 3? It was Bank of Ybor was one, because there's a place in Tampa called Ybor City, so it's called Bank of Ybor. I think there actually is a Bank of Ybor now. And then there was Southern Exchange Bank. God, I think there was one more that had some weird name. But I think we only used it a couple of times. Like that was towards the last few months.
So I guess the question is like,
was it Columbia Bank? Or there is a Columbia Bank in Tampa, but we always did them so they were similar, kind of close to the banks that were there. Like there was a Southern Exchange Bank. Ours was Southern Exchange Bank of Clarksville. So it was very small, only had 3 locations.
So that's my question. Like there's a database. I'm thinking in back then terms, I wasn't around, but like I got to assume there's a database of registered financial institutions and whatever. So all someone would have to do is type in Southern Bank of Clarksville and there's nothing there.
That actually happened with the Secret Service. When I got caught, they actually had done that. They subpoenaed
which was easy.
To subpoena?
No, I'm saying like that was an easy catch for them at that point. So they're like, well, let's just check it.
Yeah, but they actually thought the bank existed. They were looking for funds that were missing. They actually thought the bank existed. They didn't realize that everything was fake. It was during my debriefing when I had to tell them that the bank was fake. And they were like, no, it's in the registry. And I was like, yeah, there was a Southern Exchange Bank of Clarksville, or a Southern Exchange Bank. It had been sold to like Bank of America or SunTrust or something.
Shit.
So the number, yeah, the number was still there. And so they actually looked it up, and I go, "Who'd you subpoena?" And they go, "Well, there was an address." They said, "We haven't gotten anything yet." I said, "You're not good. Guess what? You're not gonna."
Wow.
So, and they said, "I called the number," and I was like, "Really?" Because by the time they'd actually interviewed me, it had been months, and I was like, "Really?"
Who answered?
I said, "Who did?" I said, and he goes, "I've left several messages." I said, "Well, I haven't paid for it in months," and so he actually took the phone out and called it, and it went boo doo doo like it. And I said, yeah, I told you I haven't paid it in months. He's like, I can't believe it. I've been leaving messages. We subpoenaed them. Like they weren't returning their calls, and they thought it's because we're the Secret Service, and they don't want to deal with us. Like he's like, sometimes people just ignore the calls if they get called from the FBI, and the institutions just won't answer. They won't return. And they're like, well, we don't have to return their call unless we get subpoenaed. So we subpoenaed them.
This is such a foreign concept to me because like I can't, knowing the rules that I had to know, like I can't even imagine something like this getting 24 hours through without someone sounding the alarm on it. But like inventing a fake bank, you would change the names a little bit and then boom, you have an answering service, you're done. And now you get to say that, I guess you were using them to say like, oh, money came through here that never did. And then you'd tie it somehow to real banks.
Well, or you had a down payment. So you have an actual down, like your down payment, when you have put down, let's say 10% on your house, you can't just say, oh, I had the money in the bank. They go, okay, well, we need it. And it has to have been there for 60 to 90 days, depending on the program. Right. Well, these people don't have their money. Like usually my people were buying a house and the seller was giving them their down payment to get the loan, to get them so they can qualify for the loan so I can get my price. If I'm selling you the house for $300,000 and these people don't quite have $15,000 to put down, they've got 10. Well, the seller will sometimes give them 5 just so they can qualify, get the 300. Now, instead of getting 300.
They would do that? The seller of the house would give money to the person buying it?
For their down payment, yeah. Totally illegal.
Yeah, but then how do they even get it? Then it's like a handshake deal, like you're going to give me that back, I guess.
Well, no, what I would always have them do is just put it directly into the title company, into their escrow account. Or you just get the cashier's check, you bring it the day of closing. So they get a cashier's check from, the remitter would be from the borrower, but keep in mind, they can go back to their bank and put it in their bank. So they get it, or even if they put their own name on it, it doesn't matter. I'll change it.
Just for people trying to follow out there, long story short is the money technically never leaves the seller. They just make it look like they're
right. They're not depositing the money in the bank account. Let's say they go get money orders, blank money orders. You can get $5,000 in blank money orders, and then you send me the copies of the money orders. Just make copies of them, send them to me, and I fill them out from my customer.
But
so now when I make copies and send them to the bank, they think there's 5,000 in money orders that were taken, that my customer has, even though they're still blank money orders. They don't get the real money orders.
I guess the only open question there that I still am not sure about is the fact that you're representing the buyer, right? Like you're the mortgage broker.
Yes,
or are you representing both?
I'm representing the buyer.
Okay, so then the seller, you're just the guy representing the buyer, and you would just be able to convince the seller, like, oh, hi, I represent client X who's buying your home. You're going to do this, and they would just do it?
Well, typically the real estate agent was involved, but even if there was no real estate agent involved, and I have a conversation with you, you believe it. You can talk to...
Yeah, they wouldn't know, right?
Well, first of all, it's one of two things. Either I'm telling you, listen, this is what I'm going to do. He doesn't have the money. Boom, boom, boom. Here's how he can qualify for the loan. This is what I need you to do. You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. This is how it goes through. Here's why. I explain it. Like my sales technique for anybody isn't bullshitting you. It's laying out, it's educating you on how it's going to work. And that way you, like if I was selling cars, I'm not going to do the high pressure. I'm not going to hype, well, you need this. I'm going to say, look, this is the reason this is the best car for you. And I am going to explain why. You're either going to accept that explanation or go somewhere else. That's it. Like I'm not going to hype. There's no high pressure. I'm not pressuring the seller. Here's what. He can get this much money. He's got this. He's got this. We need $5,000 from you. Well, that means that I'm not going to make $300,000. I'm going to make $295,000. That's right. If you want, we can jack up the sales price by $5,000 and we'll cover that down payment. But now you have to come up with $5,000 and an extra $100.
You're basically being transparent by not being transparent, but making it seem like you're transparent.
Right. Well,
at the end of the day.
Well, here's what I'm not doing. I'm not telling them, oh, by the way, this is complete 100% fraud. But they know. They know.
You think they would know every time?
I'm not
like the seller.
If they said to me, hey, listen, man, like I think this is fraud. But you know what almost never happened? They almost never said, hey, this is fraud. Almost never.
That's what I'm saying. I think a lot of people kind of goes above, because these are numbers. You're switching things around. There's a lot of people who are just like, okay, all right, sounds good. So, but like the people who did say, oh, this is fraud, what'd you say to them then?
Okay, I'm going to give you an example right now.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So I had
hello, sir. I'd like to sell my house.
Well, no, I actually, okay. So this was something where I didn't even ask the person. I'm going to give you a real example where the guy found out the whole thing was fraud. He found out this woman,
seller.
He found out that the woman buying his house did not work where I said she worked. He actually got...
so you've changed her job.
I changed her job. So because she had like multiple jobs and she was currently working at like Walmart, and didn't make enough money to qualify. So I said she worked at this other company and she'd been there 5 years. I gave him W-2s and pay stubs. Okay, fine. That's a done deal. I've already verified it. He's upset because he feels like the title company's charging too much. So he calls down there and starts arguing about how much money they're charging. During the course of that, somehow or another, the title person ends up telling him they have already received the package, none of it's going to change, this is the way it is, and ends up mentioning that, one of the reasons the fees were so high, she was going through getting a non-conforming loan. She wasn't getting a loan through like Bank of America. She's getting it through a subprime company. And he's like, why are these fees so high? Because we had him paying the fees. Well, and she explains why. Because of this, because of this, because of this.
Wait, he had to pay the fees?
I made him pay the fee. Like you've already agreed to pay up to $5,000 in closing fees. She doesn't have the car closing costs, but I raised up the purchase price to cover it. Like we're really just incorporating it in.
So he agreed to it.
He agreed to it.
It was just you said up to 5,000. So if it's
5,000,
yeah,
and he's 5, up, and for some reason he thinks he's going to call and talk them down. It's going to save him some money. Why? It's coming out no matter what. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, you already signed that.
He's
away.
A jerk off.
Yeah.
So while I'm committing fraud, I'm calling him. So,
two jerk offs here.
So yeah, absolutely. So he calls up and she goes, well, look, she this, she that, and somehow or another she ends up saying she works here. She I don't know, she works here, and he's like, what are you talking about? She works at Walmart. No, she works here. No, she works here. I actually went to Walmart and when she signed the contract, I know I've talked to her. So we've talked about she's been there for 8 months or something. And she said, no, she's been here for 5 years. No, can't be. She just moved to the area. Like as it's starting to unravel, he's realizing like everything's got to be. What do you mean she just moved to the area from Brooklyn. You know, what are you talking about? She's been here 5 years. She's been paying at the same place. She's lived at the, no, she just moved. Her lease is up in 3 months or 2 months. And, you know, she's like, okay, she's realizing this is fraud. She reads off what's being said. She knows it's fraud. He knows it's fraud. She calls the title person ends up calling the bank and tells them this is what this guy's saying. Something's not right. That whole loan's done. He calls up and tells me, look,
I got you.
This is a seller.
Yeah.
He calls up and says, listen, man. So he comes to where I'm at. He comes to my office. Tries to talk to me on the phone about it. I say, like, I'm not talking to you on the phone. Come to my office. Comes to my office, and he preached being a good Christian. He was a big guy. Like, he was flipping these houses, and she's a good Christian. And he, you know, he's bringing all this up. Like, when first time I talked to him, he was telling me about being a good Christian. And he comes to my office,
bringing God into fraud.
Well, he comes into the conference room, and we're talking. He's like, yeah, you know, they told me this, they told me that. And then I said, right. I said, okay, well, here's what I can do. I can take that loan and go to this other company, which has also approved her, and we can close in like a week. We'll go to another title company. The fees are probably going to be the same. And I said, don't call anybody. Don't this. That's what they are if you want to close the loan. And he goes, yeah, but this is fraud. I said, well, honestly, first of all, I said, it has nothing to do with you.
Fraud.
I said, you want to sell the house or not? Well, I don't know how comfortable I feel about this. And I went, well, I said, I understand what's happening here. I said, you want to sell that? Oh, I do want to sell the house. I said, okay, well, can't you do this? She starts giving me all these ideas. And I'm like, listen, bro, this chick, she was evicted here. She was here. I've done this. I've done all these things to get the loan to go through. You believe she can make the payments, don't you? Yes. You want to help her? Yes. She goes to your church? Yes.
Oh, no.
And I said, okay. I said, so you're saying you wanted to get the house. I'm telling you this is the only way to get it. Well, I don't know how comfortable I feel about that. And I said, right, but you're also flipping houses, and this is what you want to do primarily, right? Because you're trying to kind of transition from another job. He's flipping houses. You want to help get good Christians into your houses, right? And he goes, right. He said, well, yeah, I think that's the right thing to do. I said, okay, let me explain something.
You hit him with religion for this.
He's hit me with religion.
Yeah, I know, but that's what I'm saying. You brought it right back around.
Of course. Oh, not just that. Not just that. I said, listen, and he goes, I need to think about this. I said, okay, well, I want you to think about this. I said, but while you're thinking about that, I said, I want you to think about this. I said, one time there's a guy in a flood. I said, one time there's a small town that's flooding, and there's a guy in the flood. I said, and as the town is flooding, he's standing in the church. I said, and the Coast Guard comes by, or I'm sorry, the Marines come by, and they say, hey, jump in the back of this truck.
God will save me.
Yeah,
for that story.
Jump in the back of the truck, the pickup truck. We're going to save you. And he says, no, God's going to save me. I said, then the water keeps raising. I said, he has to climb up on the top of the roof. I said, and the water raises, and a boat comes by, and it says, hey, jump. They go, jump in the boat. He goes, no, God's going to save me. I said, it keeps going. He climbs all the way up to the top of the steeple, and he's holding onto the cross. I said, there's a helicopter comes. They lower a basket, and they say, get in the basket. He says, no, God's going to save me. I said, and finally, the water keeps raising, and he drowns. And when he gets up to heaven, he says, God, why didn't you save me? And God says, I sent a truck, I sent a boat, and I sent a helicopter. What did you want me to do? What did you expect? I said, what I'm telling you is I am your truck, I am your boat, and I am your helicopter. I go, if you want this loan to close next week, I said, this is how we do it. I said, otherwise, put your house back on the market.
He looked at you and said, amen.
And he looked at me and he said, well, if this is the only way. I said, it's the only way. And he goes, all right. And he got up and he walked off. And a week later, it closed.
It is amazing. It is amazing the decisions people make in a bind. And especially when you put like dollars and cents into it and they start, you know how people get about money. They start thinking about their cash flows. They start thinking about, well, if I can't do this, then I won't be able to do that. And it all comes back to their personal life, what they want to buy. It comes back to their family, everything. And then boom, a guy like that walks in there preaching about God and everything and trying to help out a good Christian, walks out convincing himself that like, oh, I did the right thing because I'm helping a good Christian. When in reality, he just went along with the whole show.
Yeah. Hey, listen, God bless him. So listen, so I mean, it wasn't difficult for me to explain to the people, this is how it works. This is the way it works, and I go, and that's the big thing is, the takeaway close. This is the way it is. That's the way it is.
Take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
That's it. And it's like, no, I'm not going to do it. Great. I understand. Great. So I call up, I tell her to find another house. I send another investor her way. I do this, I do that. He goes off. Listen, honestly, 50% of the time, that guy calls me back in a couple of days. Listen, I've thought about it. If we can get this thing to go through. Right, because you know what he has to do? He has to put the house back on the market. He has to wait 30 days to find a buyer. Then that person needs 30 days to close. 60 days, that's multiple more payments.
Right.
You know? So, you know, that's that much more time for kids to throw windows through the vacant house that's in the neighborhood. You know, listen, it's all bad. You know, houses don't do well if they're not lived in. You know, the AC has to be run, the water has to be, you know, maintained, the water pressure. There's all kinds of things. It just doesn't. Houses don't do well empty.
You were in a high, even, you know, with lower price houses, we're always talking money here, right?
Yeah.
Even if you buy in a bad neighborhood, you're spending high 5 figures, 6 figures on it, right? So you're in the perfect spot to be able to do this because you're talking about big chunks of people's quote unquote potential liquidity. You're talking about assets that, to use as you just described right there, have to be upkept, right? There's time value of money out the ass literally every day, but call it every month, right? So you have people in a situation where they're constantly forced to think about like runways here. And then you just say, well, you can sit on the runway for 2 hours or your flight can take off now. You know, and if this were something where it's lower cost, you know, a regular product or something like that, it never works because people aren't desperate. They're not as concerned about the hit to them personally, but because it's this level of finance, you basically always have them in some kind of corner right when you start.
Right. Yeah. Well, listen, and that's on every aspect of the loan process at that time. At that time, you were, as a broker, I was allowed to order the appraisals. You know how many times we would get one, maybe we'd have, so I've got 12 guys, let's say, doing 4 to 6 loans a month at $150,000, let's say, on average per loan. You know, but which now those houses are $300,000 or something. In Florida, you know, up here those houses are $1 million. You know, it's like
Florida, a little farther north, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you know the numbers. People are like, you know, where do you buy a house? I'll get that in the comments. Where do you buy a house for $150,000 in Tampa, Florida, in Ybor City? You know, 25 years ago or 20 years ago. So, but if you're an appraiser and you're making $400, let's say you're making $400 and you're doing 20 loans you're doing 20 appraisals for me, you and one other guy. That's $8,000 a month. Do you know how much money you have into your $400? You have maybe a few hours of work and you're making $400 per appraisal. You're making $8,000 for very little money. It's just software. Like it's driving out to the house, taking some photographs, coming back and spending an hour or two punching in some stuff, printing it out. I mean, you're making $400. You're doing a couple of those a day. You're making $8,000 on my company every month. So when I meet you out at a house and you walk around and you say, listen, Matt, there's a lot of deferred maintenance here. Like there's a problem here in the roof and there's here and there. Right, I know, but that's going to be fixed. So do me a favor, don't put that on the appraisal. And he goes, yeah, Matt, I don't know. I'm like, bro, come on, what are you doing? I told you I'm going to fix it. You trust that I'm going to fix it? Let's go ahead. And they go, okay, like that. That's
if you don't do it, I'll find someone else.
Well, it starts slow. You know, it's like where you throw I forget if they say it's a caterpillar or a frog. You throw a frog, you know, in a hot pan, he'll jump out immediately. If you put him in a room temperature pan and you slowly turn up the heat, he'll just sit there and boil to death. So, you know, I don't ever throw him in the hot pan, you know. So what I did was I would say, you know, I'd get him a little here, a little there. And before you know it, you're going in and you're saying, look, I need you to say this is a 4-unit building. And they're like, it's a 5-unit building. Because if in real estate, if it's over 5 units, it's commercial. It's a commercial loan. We didn't do commercial loans. And the problem with this one building I'm thinking about is that commercial loans, there were no other commercial properties in the area to compare it to. So you can't get a loan on it. Why? Because there's no other comparables. So I had this one house that was an issue for this borrower. And I said, look, I need you to say that this apartment building is 4 units. And the real estate agent was like, I'm sorry, the appraiser was like, yeah, but it's 5 units. I was like, no, it's 4 units. And he's like, I don't know, Matt. I mean, I looked up on the MLS. It says 5 units.
Oh, I already had that on the record.
Right. And it says it's selling for $100,000. You're telling me you want me to bring it in at, let's say, $250,000. I go, right. I'm having it taken down. They're removing the listing, and we're putting the listing back up at $250,000 as a 4 unit. So you can reference that. And we're saying that it's been completely remodeled. which explains why it went from a 5-unit to a 4-unit. I said, so I need you to take the pictures, take the best pictures. And he goes, what am I supposed to say about the other unit? I said, what are you talking? Are you talking about the tool shed? You're talking about the shed? I go, because that efficiency is just a shed. That's like a workroom where they keep the lawnmower and everything. He goes, what about the 5th meter? I go, the 5th meter is what runs that. That's the house meter. It runs all the electrical outside and it runs the sprinkler system. And he goes, what sprinkler system? I said, I think you should throw a sprinkler system in there that's being run by the house meter. What are you talking about? I said, plus the surveillance cameras. And he goes, he's like, and I'm like, listen, bro,
we could do that.
Work with me. And he said, yeah, I just don't feel comfortable doing that. I said, I totally understand. Go back to my office, and every one of my brokers, I walk in, I go, who has anything with Steve, whatever his name was? I do. Give me them. We're canceling all of them. We start cancel. He just starts boom, 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 boom. He gets like 7 or 8 cancellations, and then a couple other ones say, hey, don't worry about doing this one. 2 days later or a day later, I get a phone call that says, I'm going to go out to that place and open the things for that 4-unit. And I go, okay. I said, and he said, can I get those appraisals back? Of course. They're all coming over right now. I'm sorry about the glitch. No problem, Matt. It's going to be all right though, right? Absolutely. You can trust me. Absolutely. And then they do it and the loan goes through and the people make the payments and it never came back on him. I've had him go into houses that were gutted.
And he just did.
I mean, there's nothing in the house. He's putting pictures of other houses in.
Oh my God.
Because at this point, he's 8,000 plus he's got a few other accounts. So if you're making $12,000 a month and 8,000 is gone, you know how long it takes to build up those types of clients where they're sending you 20 appraisals? That's a lot of appraisals. So, I had a lot of the ability to do that. And one of the things I was doing was I was buying houses. Like we could talk about this all day, but we're never going to get through my appraisal. We're never going to get through to my story. Like this is like the beginning of my story. This is just how I became a scumbag. So what ended up happening was I ended up going to I ended up buying houses. So I would buy a house in my name.
Okay.
Right. So if I buy a house in my name and I sell it to you.
What year are we in now?
2001.
Okay.
So if I buy a house and I sell it to you, I can't do the loan. Through my mortgage company. It's not an arm's length transaction. So I would buy a house and I'd renovate it. I'd get an appraisal, and then I'd sell it to my wife in her maiden name. She never took my name as my married name. I never would let her. She's like, "Oh no, I'm going to be, Gayla Cox," and I was like, "No, you're not." No. Why? Because there's something called seasoning. Where if you buy a house for, let's say, $50,000 and you fix it up for $50,000 and now it's worth $200,000, right? Because I know 50 and 50 only make 100, but the reason it was so low was because it's in such a bad shape. So I've got $50,000 to purchase, $50,000 in the renovation, but now it's appraising at $200,000. You think, oh, you can refinance that house based off of $200,000. That's what it's worth now. You can't. You have to wait a year. Banks, they say it's seasoned.
Sure.
You have to wait for seasoning.
But if you put her maiden name on there.
But if I sell it to you, you get around seasoning because you're buying the house from me and your bank isn't refinancing it. They're doing a purchase. Purchase is different from refi. So I would buy a house for $50,000, fix it up, sell it to her for $250,000, $300,000, whatever, for like apartment buildings. And we were doing this to acquire apartment buildings. I think in 1 year we acquired 54 apartment buildings.
And she would use her real first name?
No, it's all real. It's her first name, her maiden name.
And no one figured that out?
Do you mean a bank in California?
I guess, yeah, that's true.
They don't know that I'm married to this person. And keep in mind, I'm not doing the loan. I'm just a seller. So I took those loans, and those loans, she would get a loan from a broker that used to work for me named Gretchen Zayas. So Gretchen and Pete Zayas, they owned a mortgage company. And so my ex-wife is getting loans from them to buy houses from me. Mm. No big deal, we're making the payments. I mean, it's all fraud, but we're making the payments. So she's buying them from me, and we're making $50,000 or $100,000 on every purchase. So that's how we're making, and we're renting them out, and we're keeping them, right? We're or we're selling them, reselling them again. But she shouldn't have been able to obtain the loan. So it's fraud. To me, it's not a big deal. It was to the FBI. So what ended up happening was Gretchen and Pete got busted. They were running a straw man scam where they were having people buy houses and then letting them go into foreclosure. It's called a straw man. It's kind of a person.
How does that make them money?
Well, because
they get to write the loan.
They get to do the loan, and then of course they also get to if the houses. But they weren't purchasing the houses. But basically, they had investors who were buying houses for like $400,000, but they knew they could appraise them at $600,000 or $700,000, and so they would charge the investor like $20,000 and $30,000 for the loan. The guy would buy the house, make a few payments, let him go into foreclosure. That's what he was supposed to do. Instead, he bought.
Then someone has to cover. Got it.
Right.
So you get paid out. You basically make money on collecting from the first few loans, and then the default is not on you.
Right. It's on the person who bought it. But let's face it, if I told you, look, I need you to sign for these 4 houses, you're going to make $300,000. Those houses are going to go into foreclosure. You're going to have 4 foreclosures on your record, but you're going to get $300,000. Will you do it? 99% of the people watching would be like, you're going to give me $300,000, and there's going to be 3 houses that are going to foreclose. And so basically I have 3 foreclosures on my credit, and I can turn around and claim bankruptcy. Yes, I'll do it. You give me $300,000 right now, I'll claim bankruptcy.
Got it. So the people who you would convince to do this, how did you find buyers? You just went around to people like, hey, you want to take a loan and make some money, and then
No. Remember, I was taught. You asked me what a straw man scam was.
Yeah,
and I said these people were running a straw man scam. That Pete and Gretchen were running a straw man scam. That's how they got in trouble. They were doing the loans for a guy that was going out finding people to buy houses from him.
So that guy would find them.
Right. They weren't in part of that. They would then get the loans. Now the loans were fake. They were frauding up the loans. They were making W-2s and pay stubs to make sure this guy could get the loans. And what happened was they didn't even end up making like the first payment. So there was like a first payment default, right? So they were just stupid. You have to make a few payments. But instead, there's what's called a first payment default. Well, if you're Bank of America and you lent this guy $800,000 and he looks perfect on paper and then he never makes a payment,
you're like, this sums up.
You're going to look into it.
Yeah. So they got looked into.
Of course, they got looked into, and then they contacted the FBI because now nobody's going to paying them back. They're all just ignoring them. Like it's okay. Like, oh, we can do this. And they now know it's fraud. They look into it. W-2s are fake. All these things that we had cleared initially once we looked into it. Like they weren't that good. You know what I'm saying? So they ended up, and the way Gretchen would do fraud is like she would go and try and get somebody to kind of convince somebody to cover this or cover that. Like she wasn't a document person. Like she wasn't handling all that herself. So when they start to get phone calls from the FBI, they unravel immediately. People give her up immediately. So they come into her office and they raid her. When they raid her office, she had come to me and said, look, my office, or she came to me and said, look, the FBI's asking questions. I didn't know her office had been raided. She just came to me and said, look, they're asking questions. We need to hire an attorney. I said, okay. She goes, can you do me a favor and refinance my house? And she said, I can't do it here by myself. And I said, no problem, because we're friends.
And you had been, I just want to make sure I understood this. You had been doing this business with her now, too.
She had, right, remember?
You had been writing the loans.
She'd been brokering all the loans for my wife at the time. So, and she used to work for me. So,
so you got a piece.
Huh?
You were getting a piece of something.
No, I'm not getting a piece of anything. I'm selling my properties I'm buying, selling them to my ex-wife. So we're pulling money out of the property and we're acquiring rental properties. The problem is when she got busted, she starts working with the FBI. And not initially. Initially, she just went to get an attorney. So she came to me and asked me, Matt, will you refinance my house, which really didn't have any equity in it. She said, can you refinance my house? I have to pay my attorney like $75,000. I said, sure, I can get that done. Like I can take care of that for you. So I get an appraiser to jack up the appraisal. She gives me fake W-2s and pay stubs. So she made those.
Talking to the FBI.
Yeah, she gave those to me. And keep in mind, I'm now doing a loan for her.
And you knew that. You knew the FBI was talking with her.
I knew she'd been busted. But she's a friend of mine. We went to each other. We went to parties together. We went on vacation together.
The FBI is talking to her.
Well, no, we don't know that. I don't know that she's talking to them. She's just trying to negotiate a deal. Like she's not cooperating.
But you didn't assume that?
No, I didn't because
our lights would have been up. Like, oh, okay.
I had seen the godfather. You don't cooperate. We're gangsters, bro. So we're not, I know she's not going to give me up. So I refinance her house. I get her 75 grand. She goes out and she hires an attorney. She gives him 75,000. And the first thing he says is, you need to wear a wire and get this guy who just refinanced your house. And you need to cooperate with them, and I can get you no jail time. Like, if you cooperate with them and get this guy, because she now goes to the FBI and she goes, this guy, everybody in his office is committing fraud. And I can get him to cooperate because I just did $500,000 worth of loans for him and his ex-wife. And his wife, my wife.
So she offered you up on a platter too for them.
So she calls me up.
Who were you going to cooperate on?
Oh, she thought I would cooperate on my entire staff. They're all committing fraud. So she contacts me and says, "Hey, listen, oh my God, Matt, the FBI raided my office." What? What? She's like, "Yeah, I can't believe it. This was a few days ago. And now they're asking all kinds of questions. Look, can I meet you?" And I go, yeah, meet me. Meet me at the pizza place down the street. So we go and we meet.
This is what, 02?
This is 01. This
Still
is 2001.
Okay.
Yeah, bro. That's why I was saying we got to get moving.
Yeah.
Like, I know you're curious, but if you don't want to fly me up here again,
we'll get.
My
through
girlfriend
this
said
one.
I have to be back tonight. She didn't trust me.
Trust me. We'll get to it. Keep going. You're doing great.
So what she says is, this may be your longest one ever if you keep this up. So here's what happens. So here's what happens. I go and I meet Gretchen and Pete. So I meet them, and we're eating pizza, and we're sitting there. Turns out the FBI officer was sitting right there. So I said, what's going on? She goes, okay, here's what's happening. They this, and they're asking all kinds of questions about Kayla, which is my ex-wife, which was my wife at the time. And I went, because all the loans had been done in her name,
right?
Not mine. So I'm not really in trouble.
She might be in trouble.
She's in trouble.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my God. You didn't tell them the W-2s were fake, did you? You didn't tell them the pay stubs were fake. You didn't tell them that I own the property. You didn't tell them you know me. You didn't tell them that that we didn't have the money. You didn't tell them that it was a.
There's 3 guys in a van outside going, jackpot!
God. I mean, and as I'm sitting there, I'm going, and I said, okay, wait, let's think about this. I said, you need to tell them that you never met her. She called you on the phone, that the documents were faxed in or mailed in. And so I'm trying to come up.
You're telling her how to do it.
I'm telling her how to get to a point. And I said, once you do that, you could say, I never met her. So you can't testify that you ever met her. Everything was over the phone. And that way, I'll have Kayla not answer their questions. I won't answer their questions. They're not going to indict us if you're saying, I got everything over the phone. I never met these people. I can't testify that I met these people. So at that point, the whole thing should just go away, because the truth is they really need to talk to people. They need people to cooperate.
Sure, yeah, that's how they build the case.
Right. So I know that they're not going to be able to get anything from her employer because I'm her employer. They're not going to get it. Like, all these are cell phones and stuff. Like, there's a whole thing. I can just throw everything away. You're giving them the whole plan. You got everything. So as I'm going through the whole thing, she says, Matt, we can't lie to the FBI. And I look at her and I go, what are you talking about? I go, you're lying to him now. She goes, how? I go, you just gave me, I just refinanced your house with fake W-2s and pay stubs. The whole thing's fake. And her husband stands up. Pete stands up and he goes, we've never lied to the FBI. We may not have told them everything, but we never lied. And I look at him like, the fuck are you doing, bro?
He was acting.
And I'm like, who are you telling this to? Like, I know that's not true. Who are you saying this for? Like, what you're saying right now, I know is a lie. So you're not saying it for my benefit. So
does your spine just go cold?
Oh, immediately I think, oh, wow. And I realize, like, both their cell phones are, like, right here. Like, everything is right next to me. And I'm like, oh, my God.
They got me.
And I look at her and I go, wow, I hope you're going to get something for this. And she starts crying. And she goes, Matt, I have a daughter. And I go, I don't have a son? And she goes, and I said, look, tell the FBI not to come into my office. Call me on the phone. I'll come down and talk to him. And she goes, okay. Because when the FBI came in her office,
I would have leaned in and pulled her shirt and gone like that and said it right in the mic.
Yeah, well, I'm not that cocky. So, she, because when the FBI raided her office, everybody quit. She had like 5 or 6 people working there. They all quit.
Yeah, but they did.
So I knew my guys will all quit. I don't want them walking in here. So I leave.
Oh, you were still thinking about saving the business.
I'm still thinking I can get around this somehow. So I go in, the FBI call, like literally, we're talking about 30 minutes later, I get a phone call. My secretary walks in, she goes, Agent Scott Gale from the FBI is on the phone. And she looked at me and I go, okay. I go, leave and shut the door. Don't say a fucking thing. And she goes, okay. I answer the phone. I go, hey, what's up? He goes, I need you to come down. He said, I think you know what this is about. I said, yes, I do. I said, okay, I can come down on Tuesday. And this was like a Thursday or something. And he's like, okay, I guess so. Tuesday will be fine. I said,
he
okay.
took that.
Well, yeah. What can he do? He really can't do anything. I'm not indicted. And he doesn't, what does he have on me yet? Not much.
I mean, he has you going through the entire plot on tape.
Yeah, but this isn't the local cops. They don't arrest you right away. They indict you. They get a whole case. They come and grab you after you're just done.
Yeah, but they can turn around, because they change the indictments, obviously, after they do it. They'll update that all day, but they can turn that around right away just to get it done. They do that a lot.
I mean, I'm just telling you what happened.
Gotcha.
I get it.
All right. So on your end, it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's what you're right. So I said, I'll come out. I want to give myself some time. I got to get a lawyer. So I don't tell him that. I just say, yeah, I'll come down. But listen, man, I'm fucking booked. Like I can't come down, tomorrow. I can't come down Monday. Like, can we do it Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday morning. But yeah, no problem. Hang up the phone. So I end up going to a bunch of attorneys. All of them are like, oh yeah, you're done. Like I know, like they all know the FBI officer, they know the U.S. attorney. They're like, yeah, I called them before you came here. Yeah, you apparently you have there's 2 people that wore a wire on you. And like they know the whole thing. They're like,
they had that info.
Yeah, they're like, you're done. They're like, based on what they have, what they just told me they have on you, you're done. So I end up getting an attorney, $75,000. Same thing, $75,000. That's the going rate. I give him $75,000 and he says, listen, I can keep you from getting indicted.
Now, how much? I'm just curious, side note, how much money do you have in the bank at this point? You've been doing it for a few years. Like, are you a wealthy man?
The problem is I've got probably a couple $1 million worth of real estate. And I probably have access to maybe, whatever. $100,000,
okay.
But a lot of it's just now it's tied up in real estate. Like
because you're making these deals, and
so I mean I'm flipping 2 properties. So what do? You borrow. Sometimes you borrow from hard money guys, but you get to a point where you're like, I'll just use my own money to renovate it. Like you can borrow from the hard money guys, but it's just that much more interest. So it's like it's out there. But I got $75,000. I give him $75,000. So I give him the $75,000, and he says I can keep you from getting indicted.
And now he can keep you from getting indicted.
No, he could before. He said it. Give me 75.
I thought they were saying you're fucked.
No, they're saying you're guilty and they have you, but I can keep you from being indicted. Here's what you do.
Explain.
Okay. So I give him the $75,000. He goes, here's what you're going to do. You haven't been indicted yet. Your wife hasn't been indicted. I can, first it was, how close are you with your wife? And I was like, why? He's like, you can go in and just testify against your wife. They'll indict her and you cannot be indicted. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So he says, okay, I can keep both of you from being indicted if you cooperate. And I go, but not against my wife. He's like, right. You go get the most egregious fraudulent files from some of your brokers that work for you because they're under the impression that you're running a mill that's kicking out bad mortgages. I go, okay. And he said, so go grab some of the most egregious loans from 3 or 4 of your brokers. You bring those to the FBI. You explain that they're fraudulent. You might have to wear a wire, and they'll indict them. It's called pretrial intervention. He said, you pay back any money. You agree to pay back any money that these lenders have lost. Here's the thing. They had like 4 loans, right? But two or three of those loans we'd already sold. Keep in mind, they had
on another balance sheet.
So it's like there's no money, and no money was lost. Remember, I wasn't doing it to rip the banks off. I was just trying to get around seasoning. I'm just flipping properties. I'm running a mortgage company. I flip properties on the side. So I'm thinking, I only got 1 more property, and I'm going to have that sold within a month. So there'll be nothing I don't owe anything.
And these aren't the most agreed. Again, this is the lower part of the fraud.
This is
not the really, really.
Oh no, that's later. That comes out of this is what happens.
Okay.
So what ends up happening is I say, look, I'm not going to do that. And he's like, what do you mean? So I'm not going to cooperate. I'm not going to wear a wire. I'm not going to do the same thing that Gretchen and Pete just did to me. I'm going to do to them. And he's like, well, if you don't want to go to prison, and I went, He's like, Matt, you need to think about your family. You need to think about it. I said, well, how is it that they can send me to prison when there's no dollar loss? Like, nobody's lost any money. And I explained to him that some of these loans don't even exist, and I'm currently in the process of selling the fourth loan, the fourth property. So there will be. He's like, oh no, they feel like there's $500,000. Who knows what Gretchen and Pete said was lost? Like, who knows?
Yeah.
They may have said this guy's on a huge case, but the truth is, I'm saying I've lost no money. He's always, well, there's potential loss. I said, okay. Well, and I remember he had the book, the federal sentencing guidelines, and I read through it, and I said, yeah, but look, potential loss is if there was potential loss, and I explained to him how I was doing it, and as a result of that, there at no time did they ever lend more money than was covered by the actual property. So let's say a property is worth $300,000 and the bank lends $250,000. Was there potential loss there? They can always sell the property. Now, if the property was worth $100,000 and I borrowed $200,000, there was $100,000 in potential loss. And I said, that's not what happened. I bought the properties, renovated the properties, so they were worth $200,000 when she bought them for $200,000. And she put down 20%, which was, of course, went straight to me, so that's not a big deal. So she's borrowing, let's say let's say she's borrowing $160. Mm-hmm. She's borrowing $160 on a $200,000 property. There's no potential loss there. And he's like, well, if the FBI agrees with that assessment, he said, then you're right. I can probably get you probation. So I said, right. So I'm not in a position where I need to. He's like, well, you're going to end up a felon and you're going to lose your business. I'm like, well, then that's what has to happen. But I'm not going to do that.
Wow, you went right through that.
Right. I was a gangster. Now, let me tell you something right now. So if this is on right now, that was the biggest mistake ever. If that had happened now, if I knew then what I know now, I would have taken a dolly. I would have gone into our Friday morning meeting. I would have taken a dolly and I would have loaded up every file cabinet into the back of a pickup truck. And I would have given up every single broker. And I would have walked out of the office and said, get an attorney, do the right thing. And I'd have cut every single one of their throats to have not gotten indicted. Because now I know better. But then I'd seen The Godfather, and I'd grown up on that whole don't snitch mentality. Don't tell on anybody.
Why would you snitch on them?
The street code.
Snitch on them because they would just snitch on you if you didn't?
Because they all rolled over on me.
Right.
And everybody rolls over on everybody. And every gangster out there, like for every one guy out there for every John Gotti that didn't talk, there's 1,000, 2,000, 3,000
Sure.
that did talk.
Yeah.
So John Gotti's a gangster. John Gotti died in prison. Do you see what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, but no. I'm not going to die in prison. Like, my loyalty should have been to my wife and my child. That should have been my loyalty. And those people that were committing fraud were criminals, and they didn't deserve my loyalty. So,
and you're also doing it too. So you're like,
absolutely.
So I wouldn't deserve theirs if the shoe were on the other foot, you're saying.
You know what Gretchen and Pete did? The right thing. I don't hate Gretchen and Pete. I'd say I'd have dinner with them to this day. As a matter of fact, several of the people that cooperated on my case, I talk to all the time. I talk to Allison Arnold all the time. I've talked to Becky Hauk. I've talked to Eric Tamargo. I've talked to all the people that cooperated against me. Totally cool. They did the right thing.
Wow.
I remember somebody.
Yeah, you have a really interesting view on. You have a very
because it's
30,000 foot in the air view on this.
Because after that much time, you realize, like, what do you do? Like, do you know how many guys I know that did the right thing, right? Like they honored the code, and they didn't tell on these two guys, and they went to prison. And then when those two guys got popped, they told on this guy, and this guy ended up getting another 12 years. So you could have not done. You got 10 years. You could have gotten 5 if you told on these guys.
Right.
You didn't. So you're sitting in prison doing 10 years. They then get busted. They cooperate against you. You get another 12. Now they get 12. Now you're doing 22 years. Those two guys within 4 or 5 years are back out of prison.
And they're every bit as guilty.
Right. You thought, oh, I need to be loyal to who? A couple of scumbags living off of society? Like, nobody owes me loyalty. Nobody. You're a criminal. You don't have nothing coming. Now, that's different. To me, that's different than me not knowing anything. Like if you were an innocent person, for me to cooperate against you, well, that's fucked up. This guy didn't do anything. But
that's different. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just saying in general, and everybody be like, oh, this guy's a snitch and this guy's this, man. Fuck you. You go do the fucking time. So, I don't tell you how to do your job at Walmart. Don't tell me how to be a gangster. So anyway, had things been different, I probably would have kept the mortgage company. So, and I would have obviously had to get some more brokers. So what ends up happening is I say, no, I'll just take the plea. So I take the plea. I plead, and the FBI, of course, they come back and they go, damn, there is no dollar loss. And Cox will not cooperate against these people. And I said, I will take the 3 years, but you don't get to indict my wife.
3-year probation.
Probation.
Right. Not even prison.
Right. So I get 3 years probation.
What did that consist of? Like
that probation
community
was
service stuff like that?
Compared to my probation now, that was such a cakewalk.
Like what'd you have to do?
Back then, it was probation. You have to fill out a monthly report saying I've been good, I haven't been arrested. I owed $1,000 fine, $1,000 fine, which I paid. What else did I do? They came by my house a couple of times, say hi. They didn't bother me at all. Like that was it. It was a joke. The probation was a joke.
Wow.
Compared to the probation I have now.
Right.
My probation now was the highest custody level or highest recidivism rate. It was for the first year I had to go once a week. I had to spend an hour with a psychiatrist. I had to take a program. I had to pee in a couple times. My probation officer was all over me. I'm showing him my bank statements every month. I'm filling out financial reports. They were all over me. Of course, the reason, and for good reason, because while I was on probation for that 3 years, as soon as I got probation, right, like the judge was like, look, you're getting 3 years probation. You're getting a slap on the wrist. But, you can't run your mortgage company anymore. So
you're a convicted felon.
You're a convicted felon. I can't be a mortgage broker. I can't own this company. And of course, the FBI knows that there's fraud. These guys are committing fraud, but I won't help get to them. So they're saying to me, you can't run that place anymore. So I end up selling it to a guy who's a CPA, a friend of mine who's a CPA. His name was Dave Walker. And he paid me like $8,000 a month to help him like manage the,
backdoor kind of. A little bit.
Well, no, I wasn't running it.
You weren't running it, but I'm saying like at least you still had.
Well, he didn't have
income.
Yeah, but he didn't have the money to pay me, so he can't give me. It's worth at least $500,000. He can't pay me that.
And he's got leverage on you because you got to unload it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he did me a favor. So really, he's paying me, and I needed the income. And while he was paying me and maintaining my lifestyle. I'm in the process of getting a divorce, so I lose everything during the divorce.
Did you? So after you got arrested, you and your wife were just done.
Yeah, we were done. In general, she got pregnant. She got pregnant. We got married. Right. We didn't really know each other that well. She very much wanted a guy that I'm not. The guy she's with right now is
the Marine.
The Marine. Well, he's an ex-Marine now. He is very much the guy she wanted. He's 6 foot tall. He's in, although I'm in good shape, he's in amazing shape. He's a macho guy. He's a tough guy. He's a family man. He's a guy that goes to work and works 50, 60 hours a week. He dotes on her. He's everything that I'm not. He's perfect for her. And I'm not that person,
What person are you?
I cut up a lot and I goof around, I goof off and I'm silly. And although she finds that to be funny,
not as a
yeah. And I'm not the guy that I don't teach, Little League, and I'm not going to go to the games, and I don't really know sports, and I'm not a macho guy. And at that time, I wasn't a good husband. I didn't want to be married. I'm sleeping around. I'm having sex with different, chicks that are coming in, the office I'm meeting. And whether she ever caught me red-handed or not, women sense that. They know that.
Yeah.
I've known every time every chick's ever cheated on me before, I felt it. Even when I couldn't tell, I felt it. And may have been a month later when she said, look, I met somebody. I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking, 5 weeks ago.
I knew.
Yeah. I've felt it. Like, And so when women do that, and she did that all the time, and I'm saying, doing the typical guy thing, you're crazy. You're nuts. That's nuts. Truth is, I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, what did I do? It's just intuition.
Yeah.
So, just being a scumbag, I'm 29, about 30, 29, 30 years old. And I'm being, I guess by that point I'm like 31 years old, and I got a bunch of money. I got a dozen people saying, Matt, hey, can you help me? Matt, hey, can you look at this? Matt, I'm calling the shots. I've got a ton of money. I've got a great car. I'm in decent shape, so.
And then even after all this shit, you still have the real estate. You paid $1,000 fine and $75,000 to a lawyer.
Right.
You're okay.
I'm okay. So, but the problem is I don't really have that much of an income. I lost everything. And
this guy supplements a little bit of it.
A little bit of it, but I'm spending a lot of money. I have to buy another house. I have to renovate that house. I start buying real estate again.
You're paying child support.
A couple thousand a month in child support. For a kid that was he was like this tall. There's just no way he doesn't need that much. I've been in the house. I know. But it was a lot. So anyway, what happens is,
if you are looking to search the web privately and not have all these websites track you when you leave, check out my friends over at Privado VPN. Privado is the VPN company that gives you full privacy while not losing you any speed, and it allows you to use the product on up to 10 different devices at a time. You got a laptop, you got a tablet, you got a phone, whatever, you can use it everywhere at all times. So hit that link in my description for Privado, and you will go to my landing page with the company, and you will see a plan there for $4.99 a month. It's the same one I use. You're going to love it, so check it out.
I basically tell my buddy, Dave, who bought the mortgage company, I say, listen, man, I'm going to go ahead and let's start like a development company. Let's start flipping properties or something. And he's like, okay, well, where are we going to get the money from? And I was like, so I've been thinking about this. I said, so what I'm thinking about flipping properties. And he goes, okay. I go, to get the money. He's like, all right, well, how much is that? I'm like, well, the problem with flipping properties in those areas is, one, it's the clients. People that buy in that Ybor City area, it's a low income area. So people that are buying these houses for $150 or $100 to $150,000, or let's say they're buying for $100. So people that are buying these houses for $100,000 in this area typically aren't good borrowers. They have problems. Like, they'll quit their job. They've had 4 jobs in 2 years, or 5 jobs, whatever.
So it's going to be hard to clear loans.
Yeah. So it's getting them the mortgages. I'm like, so basically, you have to basically commit fraud. And he's like, all right. And so he understood what I was already, who I was. He was already a shiesty guy. He's always been a shiesty guy.
But you went right. You didn't even think twice. You just went right back to that.
That's what
we're going to have to do.
Yeah. That's just that's how it is. So
did you think, because you were now removed from it, that meant you weren't going to have any problem getting away with it?
No, I thought I had a foolproof plan.
Oh.
I got a foolproof.
And what was that?
Well, eliminating all of these people so my plan was create a fraud where you're committing fraud where nobody knows a fraud's been committed.
Oh, so fix the last time.
Yeah,
basically.
Fix the last time. Do everything yourself. And basically create a situation where, where basically everything's fraudulent, and even the banks don't know they've been defrauded. So what I did was, and you've got nobody to tell on you, really, nobody. So what do you do is so if you're flipping properties, there's multiple problems. One problem is the borrower, right? So if you use a straw man, like you get somebody with good credit to buy 5 houses and then let them go into foreclosure, you saw what happened with Gretchen.
Yeah.
So you can't rely on them. And on top of that, they want something for it. So you got to give them a chunk of money. And I thought, well, how do we do that?
How do you cut out the middleman?
Right. So what you do is you create your own borrowers. So, and what I did was I'd already figured out how to create synthetic identities. I'd met a woman who had gotten divorced. Her credit was ruined during the divorce, and
is this Hauk?
No,
not yet.
No, this is just a borrower. Came in one day.
Oh,
yeah, this was
simple.
This was a year before. A borrower had come in, and she gave me W-2s and pay stubs, and she had perfect credit. I pulled her credit. But then when I looked at the W-2s and pay stubs, I happened to notice that the Social Security number was different than what she gave me. Just happened to notice it. And I was like, what the fuck? So we call her in. I say, look, here's a discrepancy. I said, I looked at your credit. You've got whatever, 3-4 years worth of credit. And I was like, this is a discrepancy, though. And your W-2s and pay stubs. And she thought she was like, oh, my gosh. I was like, no, we're going to get you the loan. I'm going to change this. But I want to know, how did you get, whose credit?
Tell me how to do this.
How did you do this? And she said, okay, well, it was kind of an accident. She said, I was married 5 years ago, got a divorce. During the divorce, I got evicted because my husband wasn't helping pay. I had a son. She said, and all my credit cards went bad. So, and I was behind on my electric, everything. I said, okay. She said, so what I did was, because we got divorced, I started using my maiden name. I said, all right. She goes, so my name's changed.
Just like you did with your wife.
Right. Well, she says the second thing I did was I went to go get another apartment, but I knew that I owed for water and electric. And so my friend told me, you should use your son's Social Security number. I know a girl who's done that before. So I used my maiden name, which I hadn't used in 10 or 12 years. She goes, I used my maiden name and my son's Social Security number and my date of birth. So now she goes, and I pulled when they pulled my credit, they pulled it on the new apartment complex, which the new address wasn't associated with the old credit. The new Social Security number wasn't associated with the old credit, and the name wasn't associated. The only thing that was the same was her first name and her date of birth.
But they couldn't see that the SS number was for a child?
You can see that the Social Security number has been issued within the last 5 years.
So that would be a child.
Well, you would be shocked how many times you pull someone's credit report and it says fraud alert, and you just ignore it. The reason you ignore it is, my name's Matthew Cox, but I'm also Matt Cox, and I'm also Matthew Cox with 1 T and not 2. And sometimes I'm Bevan Cox, and sometimes I'm Matt B. Cox. Every single one of those is a different name in the system, and it says fraud alert, alias. So the fact that the Social Security card said that it's been issued in the last 5 years, keep in mind her son at the time probably was, let's say he was 9. So it may not have even said that. I've gone into banks, given them.
So 5 years is kind of.
I've gone in with Social Security numbers that have been issued a month ago, 2 months ago, and they've been like, "Gee, that's weird." Says it was issued within like the last year, and I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, they're like, "Yeah."
I'm 40.
I'm like, "Really?" They're like, "Yeah," and then I go, "That's strange." Oh, I have my W-2 from 2 years ago, same social. They go,
wow.
That is weird. Oh well, they just keep going. So what happened is, she did that, and she goes, so what happened was once I got in the new apartment, I started getting pre-approved credit cards. So I filled out one of the credit cards. She goes, and I got it. She said, then maybe a couple months later, or 6 months, or a few years later, I ended up getting, like a year later or something. She goes, I ended up getting a pre-approved auto loan. She goes, so I went in and I got a new car under the new SOCH. She goes, she knew that all these pre-approvals were with the new SOCH because it was a new address. And she knew it was a new address. Nobody at the old one had it because she just walked away. And she knew the only place she had gone to was she'd applied for water and electric. So she knew they'd sold her information and got the pre-approvals, filled them out, got them. Now she said, so I realized I'd created like a whole new identity. And I was like, definitely getting you a loan. Fuck, I wanted to give her a discount. So what I did was
she just told you all this because she thought like you had her dead to rights or something, and she was trying to let you in.
Yeah, right. And we got her a loan. So what ended up happening was, first I tried it with a bunch of, keep in mind I have tons of 1040s that are in the file cabinets with kids' Social Security numbers on them because people use their children for a tax deduction. I have 3 kids, tax deduction. Here's their socials. Great. So I've got those socials. Also, we get kids with Social Security disability. I've got their Social Security numbers. So I go and I start pulling kids that are 5 years old, 7 years old, and pulling their credit, but making up different names. So what happened first, I pulled one and it came up, and I said, of course, I'm saying the kid's like 32 years old. 32 years old, this, and it comes up and it says, and of course, it says there's no credit profile found. So I was like, okay, I don't like that. That means they couldn't find anything. And I thought they couldn't find anything because the first time they've heard of them. So then I went, next guy, I take the information and I go and I apply online for several credit cards. First, they get denied, of course. But then when I go and I pull his credit directly from the credit bureaus, now it says all the information's correct because they've heard of him 20 minutes earlier. They've now heard of him, and they have 3 inquiries from 3 different credit card companies. So they know this person exists. And so when I pull it, they're like, yeah, there's a credit profile. He doesn't have any credit, but he does exist, even though he doesn't exist. Like, I used a different name.
So now if you're the one on the other end saying, are we going to give you the loan or not, you get to make the call.
Right. Well, I'm not doing that. What I decide to do is I decide to start now I understand how to make a fake credit profile. So eventually what happens is I go into Social Security, and I explain all this in the book. Like it's more, I really explain what I did was. But
and what's
anyway,
the name of your book for people out there?
Shark in the Housing Pool. And there's audio version.
You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon.
It's out there.
So what ends up happening is I explain a little bit more in detail, but the bottom line is what I do is I end up calling Social Security over and over and over again until I eventually figure out that if you have a kid that's under the age of 12 and you don't need to bring your child, because if you have like a 3-year-old and you call up and say he doesn't have a Social Security number, because they'll say, was he born in a hospital? And
yeah, how would that happen?
Well, a midwife. So if your child was born with a midwife, then the pediatrician should have issued a Social Security number, but they don't always do it. So what happens is I made several calls until I just kept changing the scenario until finally somebody said, you have to bring in your son. I was like, well, my son is in Brazil with his mother. And they were like, well, she goes, well, shoot, I'm sorry. If the child's more than 12 months old, you have to bring him in. Hang up the phone, call back. I must call 10 times. So I call back, hey, my son, he's 10 months old. He's this, in Brazil, born with midwife, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't have a Social Security number. And they go, oh, okay. Well, then you need to come in. We don't need your son to come. Just you need to come in with a shot record, with his birth certificate and a shot record.
Boom.
So I make a birth certificate.
How easy is that to make?
Fine arts degree. It's not that difficult. I mean, you need an embossed, a seal that says like, Hillsborough County Vital Statistic Records and that sort of thing. You need those things, which I figured out how to get.
How'd you get them?
Well, I mean, I altered the name because they won't. If you go to these places that print them, they won't give them to you because they say no, that's a government body. We can't make it right. So I altered the name instead of saying like Office of Vital Statistics. I said Department of Virtual Records, and instead of like the state of I put like incorporated in the state of Florida, and so I just altered the names a little bit, and that way then I would chip off parts of the letters, and then I would take 220 grit sandpaper and do it over and over and over to wear them down. And that way, when I do the embossment, you still can see kind of what it says. It looks like the stamp, and they really just feel it.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.